8 a.m. And so I'm going to welcome everybody to the intersection where faith and community and civic leaders intersect and come together. We've been meeting since near the beginning of COVID every Thursday, first starting with learning about COVID and then and working together and knowing in those relationships we can work more strongly together. And so, of course, that went into more conversations. The very first one that kind of went straight from what is COVID, right, and what our needs were, but the rise in domestic violence during COVID. And so then with the intersection, it has just expanded into keeping our leadership and our community as up to date as possible with what's going on, getting us to build more and more collaborations. And so this mental health series that we're doing at the intersection is a result of years of working towards collaboration and working together, and very intentional in terms of what we're doing right now with mental health, NAMI, CHCS, and all of our partners, the county and the city, and the list is long, our faith community, working towards Pathways to Hope, our annual conference in August. So I'm throwing in some announcements here too, but to mark everybody's calendars for August 28th and 29th. That's when our Pathways to Hope will be happening. More current and more this direction in the world and time. We are again having a series of really great series on mental health that started really at the end of or at the beginning of April and is running through the end of May. And we've got that schedule all firmed up now. And so that will be going out with every week's notice who that is. But don't forget, one of the huge things that comes with that is that Sacred records all of these. So, for instance, after today, and you've heard this amazing briefing by Cello, we'll all be able to access that, including you, Cello, where you could utilize that. I don't know how, but it might be a link. NAMI could have a link to this, an assortment that goes to this recording. People can take this recording back to their teams, their congregations, organizations. Word of mouth is one of the best ways to move information and the movement forward itself. But it's always great if you can have the mouth that brought the information forward first, right? So it's really great that we have these recordings, and we'll put that link into chat. There are many things though that are happening between now and August and Pathways. May 21st, we'll have the next Sacred Action Lab. It too is on mental health, partnered with NAMI. Lauren Bird, who is the new executive director at NAMI, will be facilitating a panel that day on how to navigate mental health among other complexities of life, like with dementia, economic disparities and disabilities. How do you do that? We have someone coming from Johnson & Johnson, their community outreach, who will be the keynote speaker on May 21st, and talking about that continuum of care and hospital, and trying to curtail the recidivism into hospital stays. How can we work with that? It's going to be a great in-person Sacred Action Lab, 9 to noon on May 21st. And all that information will keep pumping out to everybody. Then on May 29th is the annual Behavioral Health Conference, the county CHCS, which we'll also be all participating in. We're doing everything we can, and there's good reason for that. So we really want to get to our briefing this morning, and I'm going to hand this over to Doug to introduce cello and um, and some of the things that the public that we all need to know. So, Doug, I'm turning it over to you. And cello, thank you for being with us today. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you, Ann. Dr. Consuelo Walls-Bass is with us today, and she um, asked people to call her Cello, so we do. She is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences uh, and focuses her research on understanding of psychiatric disorders. She established the UT Health Brain Collection Resource to help study brain disorders, and she also leads the psychiatric genetics program. I could go on and on, but those are kind of the highlights. She graduated from UT Health Science Center here in San Antonio. Um, and while she was here in San Antonio, she served on the NAMI board of directors, where I first met her. Um, and she has a new book, which she's going to say a few words about, called My Sister. And she's married to Dan and has two sons. And it's just been a real privilege to get to know her over the years, and so glad that we're kind of reconnecting here in San Antonio. So, Cello, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Doug and Ann, and all of you for having me here today and allowing me to speak. I think this is an amazing initiative, and I'm always just really the main thing that I do is science. And of course, I want to understand, as Doug said, that is my work, what causes mental illness. But the reason I do it mainly is to help people understand and to reduce stigma. That is my main goal in life. And let me start sharing because I do have some slides. I have very little time, but let's see. Can you see my?
We can.
Okay, I had this before, but actually, let me start from the beginning. So yes, as Doug mentioned, I wrote this book actually 6 years ago during COVID is when I started it, and I've been doing this work in mental health and biology, understanding what causes these illnesses for 30 years. But I've never really talked about my family and why I do this. And really, why I do this is to understand what happened, first of all, to my mother. There she is. And then to my sister, who was right here. Her name is Patti. She has schizophrenia. They both have schizophrenia. The rest of us we're five total. The other four siblings are also here, and we are all honestly very high functioning. And that is something that has haunted me in terms of understanding why her and why not the others. We all grew up with my mother, and it was an extremely chaotic and very, very difficult childhood and adolescence. So when I started writing this book, I had all this understanding already of mental illness and why these things happen. And start writing it for me was just really a form of therapy. And I hope this is what I hope that I can help other families and help them understand why their son, why their daughter, why their mother, why their sibling. All of us have these same questions, I'm sure. So this is my family right here. Also have over here, as Doug mentioned, my husband. His name is Dan. Actually, he's his cousin is Lori List. I mean, Berna List. I don't know if any of you know her. She's a very strong advocate for NAMI, and that's how a lot of my work is through them. But I have two sons. There they are, Danny and Andres. And really now the work I do is for them because honestly, I'm still very fearful for them. And I'm hopeful also though with the science and the advances that we have made that there has been enough progress that hopefully soon we will have some cures. And that's sort of what I want to share. I don't have time to get into a lot of the science today, but I'm hoping that with what I wrote the book is more of a narrative, a memoir, and in there I put science in there as well, so that as people were reading it, they can see, okay, this was happening because of this. So the book comes out actually it doesn't come out till September now, September 15, but anyway, maybe hopefully through NAMI we can hear more about it later. But What I do want to talk about today is really the amazing advances that we have made in science, and I think it's been incredible, and I am very hopeful. So when I started this work, actually, it's been yeah, 30 years. This is the slide that I was showing even back then, and we've always known there's a strong genetic component for schizophrenia. It runs in families. But we've always known that it's not just the genetics, because even when people have twins, identical twins, only about 60% of the time do both twins have the disease. So there has to be something else going on, right? And there's the environment, and how do these genes explain all these symptoms? And I'm sure many of you know, schizophrenia is extremely heterogeneous. We have the psychosis, the hallucinations, the positive symptoms. We have the negative symptoms, which are more like lack of affect, lack of emotion, no interest in anything, sometimes can be confused for depression. And then the cognitive symptoms, which is really difficulty in learning and or doing the most basic actions. So all of these things together are schizophrenia. And what's happening is that there's some genes there that are causing the disease. But right now, even now, after all these years, we are still here in terms that we don't have any test, any biology, nothing that we can use to diagnose the disease. It's still talking to the patients, checklist of questions, and that's the diagnosis. So we are working over here, those of us that are working in this field, first of all, to try to find the genes, and then what are the genes doing? So again, I don't have time. In the end, I will give my email around if anybody has questions about the science. I can explain it, and I think it really, now we have the understanding that it's the genes, but also the environment and what everything that we do in our lives from the moment we are conceived in utero, during birth, all of it causes changes in the brain through these epigenetic modifications. And that's something that I've learned in the being in this field. Epigenetics was finally discovered maybe 20 or so, 15 years ago, and now we really understand how that works. The environment changes how our genes are regulated in space, basically, and turns genes on and off during our development. And that is happening constantly from the moment we are conceived. And that is why we are so different from all of us are different, our behaviors are different. It is because of these epigenetic modifications. So we're not changing the gene sequence that we inherit, but the environment changes how those genes get turned on or off. So, like I say, everything matters. Everything that we do, and this is something that I have learned, and I think it's really amazing now to see. It's kind of daunting, but whatever we do right now, me speaking is changing my genes and how my genes are turned on because I'm a little stressed, and that's happening as we speak. So we really need to understand mental health disorders in the context of this, of our environment, how everything matters, and how together with the genes that we inherited, that leads to the disease. And another important thing that we need to understand is that these epigenetic changes are inherited. So it's not just our DNA sequence that is inherited, but also these changes that occur because of our environmental exposures, those are inherited as well. So that really opens up our understanding of why it is that when two twins have the same genetic makeup, only one of them had the disease and the other doesn't. It is because of this the talk between the environment and the genetics is different in the twins. So, okay, now going back to my family, this is what since I've been learning this and to understanding it, my father moved in with me during COVID after he had retired, and he was telling me stories that I had never heard about my mother and things that had happened to her. And I really then understood, okay, that environment, that trauma, what happened to her? Well, this is her father, my grandfather. Um, Sorry, sometimes difficult to talk. I don't ever talk about my family. This is actually the second time I'm doing this, so bear with me. But he was her idol from what I came to know, and he had a stroke when she was 12. And so this is him now. In this picture, he already had the stroke, but you see the whole left side of his body was non-functional. So he could not basically move. He had to like drag himself. And when that happened, my mother was 12, but she was the oldest of the six siblings, and she literally had to take care of the entire family while then my grandmother would go and she did never worked in her life, but after that, from then on, she had to go out and start to make a living. So that all of those things that happened to my, and I think it was very stressful for her because that trauma is, like I say, those environmental stressors, if they happen early in life and at a particular times in our lives, that is what matters. I mean, we all undergo stress at some point, right? But what matters is the timing of those stressors. And during development, having exposure to stress is hard. So my mother married my father when she was very young, 21. My father was 22. And she started having children really young. By the time she was 23, she already had three siblings, the oldest three of us. And they moved to the United States from Mexico. And that was very hard for her because they moved up to Ohio. It was actually, Wheeling, West Virginia initially was a really small town. Nobody spoke English, nobody spoke Spanish. It was like, no, at the time, my father says it was very hard for her because she didn't know English. She was away from her family, her country, her culture. And that was the additional, that stressor then triggered her symptoms. This is the way my father explained it. So that she had my sister Patty while they were living there, and she was hospitalized right after having my sister. I'm 5 years older than her. And now I understand knowing this, this is the early stages of the illness start around late teens and early 20s. That's exactly when those first symptoms appeared in my mother. And there has to be something that's the stressors plus the genetics. Remember that. But what's happening during those years is really interesting. Our brain is developed we start with a whole bunch of brain connections, a lot of neurons talking to each other, millions and millions of connections. And we start losing those connections right around adolescence, right at this time. You see, this decrease is called pruning. That's a normal process. We all go through it. But what was thought for years was that people with schizophrenia, they needed those extra connections. That's why you couldn't see those symptoms before. But when they start losing those connections, then the illness starts. And something has to trigger it. So my mom, the stress that she was going through, having my sister, all of that caused her first hospitalization. But what I really, very, really want to tell you is that now we do know actually that's exactly what's happening. After years and years of genetics and trying to find these genes, I won't go through the details, but now we have around 260 candidate genes that we know are very, very strongly, the evidence for those genes is high and that they are involved in causing schizophrenia in one way or another. So 260 genes, but of course, one person, my mother, doesn't have those 260 variants or those 260 mutations. She's going to have a few of them. And for example, my sister or somebody else has maybe a different set of genes. And it's the combination of those genes that leads to the illness. Now we know that those genes are involved in those synaptic processes, those brain connections, and also regulating the immune system, regulating how we deal with stress, and rating our bioenergetics and mitochondria energy metabolism. Those are the main mechanisms that we're finding from those genes. And here now we can see that many of those genes, in fact, yes, they're involved in this pruning. And we can see when they're turned on. Remember, I told you the epigenetics regulates when they get turned on or when they get turned off. They're turned on exactly at exact periods of time when our brain needs them. And here's those ones that are involved in synaptic plasticity and synaptic pruning. This C4A one is a strong candidate gene. I call it candidate because we need to do a lot more work to make sure to see what is happening there. But the pruning process, we know now definitely those genes are involved. Okay, so I don't have a lot of time, but I just want to go back to my mom. What happened was, as you know, with the illness, there is these, you have a psychotic episode, and then you can go almost back to normal. But every time you have an episode, your brain, your normal baseline gets worse and worse and worse. So that's what was happening with my mom. We moved back to Mexico, and during that time, my sister what happened with the older three of us, we just would leave the house. We had to lock my mom up in the house. There was in Mexico still a lot of stigma. Nobody would talk about it. And there were no hospitals, no treatments, no nothing. So all we could do was lock her up and leave my sister there. She didn't have anywhere to go. She was, you know, small child. Whereas the older ones of us, we were teenagers. We could just leave the house. Of course, we didn't know what this was causing to her. But now I think knowing the stress, again, talking about trauma, stress, environment, this was extremely deleterious for her. Being left alone with my mom, who basically ignored her. Actually, violence was very much almost an everyday occurrence in my mom, and she had a lot of violent episodes, and a lot of them were directed towards my sister. So there she is. She was gorgeous, beautiful. Um, but when I started learning, I started learning about this when I was 27. My sister got diagnosed in her early 20s. And before we knew she had schizophrenia, she had disappeared. We didn't know where she was. I called my father and I told him, I think my sister has schizophrenia. I see this is all these symptoms that we know. We can now detect early, even though the full-blown disorder is not there, we can start to see this early manifestation. I think she has schizophrenia. He didn't want to talk about it. He just refused to even speak about it. He would say, no, she does not. He could not. I mean, I think for him, losing his wife and then his daughter was just too much for him. Well, eventually we found her. Well, she married this amazing person named Isaac, who took care of her for 20 years. He's the one that got her reconnected to all of us and saw her through the first 10 years of her illness. He passed away of cancer 6 years ago, which is when I went to get her. My husband and I, Dan is right here in the kitchen actually with me right now, but I can't do this without him. His father had bipolar disorder, as I said, so he understands these illnesses very well. Well, we went to get her. She lives with us now. She's stabilized on clozapine, but it's been years and it's been a very difficult path. We had to get her hospitalized against her will. Um, but I know it's a very difficult thing to do, but I do not have any regrets. She didn't speak to me for a long time because I did that, but now she thanks me. And there she is, and she's happy. Honestly, she loves life. She just turned 50 last year. This is us celebrating. And there's my mom. My mom is with my other sister, Jenny, in Mexico. Um, she doesn't look at the difference between the two of them. My mom's negative symptoms are very, very strong. She responds to medications in terms of the psychosis, but the negative symptoms are not. None of the medications right now help with negative symptoms or cognitive symptoms. So cognitive impairment, my sister right now has the cognitive ability of an 8-year-old. It's been in decline. We've seen it happen, but she's happy. So that's all we can think about. Okay, so I don't have time to talk about the latest progress, but I really want to leave you with hope because I think we are getting to the point where we can now understand. We can make little mini brains. We can have the skin cells converted into brain cells. And from there, we are actually having little human brains because we could never do this before. That was why we could not understand this illness. But we are making amazing progress towards that. And what I want to leave you with is that it's very frustrating for me when people ask me, what can you do for me now? I know we need help now. Our families are suffering. We can't wait for science. That's something that causes a lot of anger, upset for me because no, I can't help you. I don't know what's happening. We still don't know. We're getting there. We know there's genes, we know there's environment, and the more those stressful things happen, that's when you have the illness. But you can have these protective factors. I think we now have an understanding of the environment and how that works. So what I do with my own children, I've done that since they were children. All I can do is control their environment as much as I can. And I know I can't control everything, but my husband and I tried to give them this stability, this everything as possible to reduce their stress, structure as much as possible, give them structure. And I think that does go a long way. So what I can leave you with is, for me, find ways to, as much as you can, help yourself so you can help others. You can't do that alone. I know it's too hard. I can't do it. I have my support, and I'm very grateful for that. I hope to help others to understand this and to support as much as I can. So that is where I am right now. But I'll leave you with this. If there's my email, anybody has questions, I'm happy to talk more about the science, which I do. I can talk about science all day long. It's more difficult for me to talk about my family, but the science is something that I love, and I think we are getting a lot of progress. And the link to the book is there. There's that the QR code. So there's the website, and you can see what the book is about and register if you want to know when it comes out, which is September 15th. All right, I'll stop sharing and just see if we have time for some discussion.
First of all, Cello, I just want to thank you for coming today and sharing this with us. But I just want to affirm what you have done in this telling of your own story for the rest of us. And one of my favorite words is courage, to act from the heart. And that's what you're doing. It takes that. And we could have another whole session, and I'd love to hear that, about your own healing because of your courage. What has happened
I do
through
want
that
to say
exposure?
that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I actually want to, in the book, I did talk about how each of the other four of us who do not have schizophrenia, but how each of us has dealt with it in different ways, and the trauma, because the trauma was there. So all of us were a little bit different in terms of how we were dealing with it, and how we, to this day, handle and still are dealing with the trauma and the effects and the consequences.
Mhm.
All of us have something. We don't have schizophrenia, but we all have something, right? So, yes, I think talking about it for me has been breaking the silence, and oh, it's been amazing. Just wow, I feel so good. Just wow, talking about it honestly for me has been it's been a healing process.
And understanding through the science. I'm going to turn this back to Doug. I hope you can stay with us until 8:45. Um,
Okay.
we'll have some conversation now. I hope you can be with us August 28th and 29th. I wish you could tell your book publisher to get the book printed before August 2028.
Actually, I
But
can have some copies ahead of because we're gonna send it out. The reason we delayed it is because he explained to me he's gonna send it out to these advanced readers. That's like the thing writers do, and they then write reviews about it and recommend it to bookstores and libraries and things like that. So we will have some copies. I can bring some. Yes.
okay, so Doug, if you would,
I
for the
see
moment.
Alice has a question, or she has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you for all of that. Um, I guess my question is a very small question that you only have 30 seconds to answer. And it's not that small, I'm joking with you. But do you see hope with the studies being done on hallucinogenics and that type of treatment? Do you see a lot of hope there? Because it
Actually,
sounds,
yes. Yeah, I'm not. I have colleagues, very close co there. We're doing, I say we in our community of researchers in my department, they are doing those studies. And I do have a lot of hope because, like I was explaining, these changes in the brain and the way that the cells talk to each other, that's broken. And I think the psychedelics, we don't know how yet, but they change that conversation of the cells in the brain and somehow change things to in a way that is helping. Specifically, actually, for depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, I don't know that for schizophrenia, but I think yes. I think it will happen also for schizophrenia. So I'm very hopeful, but we do need to do a lot more research and a lot more careful studies because, it's psychedelics. So
yeah.
we have to
So good,
be with
good
care.
to know. Yeah, because you hear all kinds of stuff on the news and
Yeah.
people advocating for it and stuff. I'm like, okay, I want to hear from a doctor. Thank you.
Oh, I thank you.
From a scientist point of view. Thank you for that.
Who else has questions or comments?
I have a question for you. First off, thank you so much for this presentation. I have a sibling with schizophrenia, and I have another sibling who's a psychologist, and you know, I still think it's like really difficult for us to like process everything that we've gone through because of it. My I'm just hesitating on my trans sister, who's the one with schizophrenia. It's been decades of drug abuse and homelessness and prison and everything like that. And I'm curious how you, with your other siblings who do not have schizophrenia, how you all process like all the emotional trauma that your family has gone through. Is it something that you all talk about together? And yeah, I suppose I'm
Oh,
really interested in this book now because I'm
thank
like,
you for that question. Actually, we never talked about it until sick. When I started writing this book, I told them, I said, I'm writing a book and I will not do this unless you are with me in it and you agree and you all support me and my father too. And they all did. It was amazing. And we started sharing, oh no, this happened this way, that happened that way. But so that was an extreme because we did never talk about it ever. It was like the stigma, like, no, we don't even want to talk about it. We don't know what's happening. We just try to ignore it. And we each would leave the house. Literally, we would never at home. That was our reality. But I just answer your question. We dealt it very different. My brother, one of my brothers, he still lives in Mexico. He can't talk. He doesn't see my mother. He doesn't even talk to my sister. He can't. And he's told me this, and we all know, and the other three of we understand. He told me there's just too much trauma for him, and his way of dealing with is not talking to about it and not talking to. He hardly speaks to us. So that's how he'll deal with it. So we're all different, and we don't blame him if everybody dealt with this in a different way. Like I say, we're all different in terms of how the trauma impacts us. So now that I know that, and then we did have anger. My sister, who takes care of my mother, they live in the same town, and my brother maybe sees her once a year for a little bit, like on Christmas or Mother's Day. He goes for 30 minutes and then he leaves. And she would be very angry about that. And once I would wrote this book and she read about these things. Now we understand. I mean, we don't blame him. It's too hard. So. We could talk more about it. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it and maybe share our experiences.
Anybody else have a question, comment?
Yeah, I had a question. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal story. And my name's Tom Roth. I work with the San Antonio Housing Trust, and we're in the process of developing supportive services property for kids aging out of foster care, and also working with Thrive on another property for LGBTQ plus kids. So and now there's just organically a lot of trauma in that whole situation. And I was just wondering, the earlier a diagnosis is made and the person gets into a more supportive environment and gets whatever medical care they need, does that have a better outcome the earlier the intervention?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That is crucial. And that is one of the things I'm trying to convey. Yes, with schizophrenia, we know that first episode happens. And like I say, there's that dip, and then the brain appears to come back to normal almost. And then in many families, what they think, oh, it's okay. It was just a one-time thing. Nothing happened. But that's not the case. And there's the refusal to see, or maybe not the refusal, it's not we didn't know before that all these symptoms that we could maybe see, they were already there. But the science does show that if you treat someone right there in that first episode, the chances for a full life are very, very high. So I really believe in that. And I think the more we educate families and more we like, look, if that happens, you have a family history of schizophrenia. I've been watching my children like hawks. I've taken them to psychiatrists many times. Like, tell me, do you see something? And so far, no. But we are prepared. If there is something that happens in that first episode, we will take action because there is evidence that treatment early on does help.
I guess the other question I had was in certain cultures, it's a stigma and it's like nobody talks about it or, nobody gets the treatment because they don't want to acknowledge it. How do you, I know that's a long process, but how do you kind of overcome that in certain communities, and especially in San Antonio?
Absolutely. That is actually a big part of my book. The religious aspect, I am very myself. I have a lot of faith. I grew up Catholic, but at the same time, there is that thinking that you just have to pray, or it's the devil, or that, you know, no, don't talk about it. It's the devil, and that's it. So we have to overcome that. Um, I think it's getting better, but my thought is that we say absolutely faith. We have to have faith. You cannot do it without faith, but you have to understand that is not the devil. God didn't cause this. It's not a punishment for anything. It's something that happens, and we can try to understand it with science and treat it with science. And the two things don't have to be divorced. They can be together. And that's really what I'm hoping. I really, really strongly believe that because I do have a lot of faith. I couldn't have gone through this without my faith, but it has been also a source of a lot of stigma. So,
Let me we got a couple people. We have a few minutes left. I know Peter had his hand up and then Martha.
Correct.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you, Anna. And of course, thank you, Cello, for the presentation. Amazing story. My late wife, as she was passing, she had frontal lobe dementia. And so she went through that process of the decline of the cognitive ability, and it's so challenging for family. And so I can really relate to the way people process it differently. But my question, I love the way you presented the epigenetics part of it and epigenetics modification. And I know we're talking about the mental part of it. And I know that, of course, the physical part of the genes seems like sounds like it's easier to transform the physical part. And I just want to know if there was any science behind that as far as the physical benefits of the epigenetics modification versus the neurological part of it. Because I know, like you said, schizophrenia is a different level compared to like depression and other types of mental disorders. So just feedback
yes,
on that.
thank you. The epigenetics to me is a huge advancement in understanding. So yes, the idea is that if we understand how those genes are changing and at what time points during development are changing, we will be able to come up with treatments, pharmacological treatments that may be able to reverse those changes at some point. I do think that that has a lot of merit, and the science towards that is going to be very helpful because now if we find the specific genes and the changes that are happening epigenetically, we can maybe reverse them somehow. And there is a lot of evidence that epigenetic changes can be reversed. So I think there is a lot of hope there.
Thank you. Thank you for your story.
Let's take a question from Martha and then Ann.
Okay. A brief comment and then a kind of question. The brief comment is I have a colleague who specializes in negative symptoms of schizophrenia, and I very much thank you for including that, particularly for not people here, but people in general. We think of schizophrenia only in terms of negative symptoms, and the negative is so disabling as well. Thank you for including that section. My second comment is in the chat, so I'll just give you one sentence, which is so much of this is applicable to people with other mental health issues and useful for people family and friends caring with people with other mental health issues, particularly your part at the end about supportive environments.
Yeah.
So even those of us who aren't dealing directly with a friend or family member with schizophrenia can benefit very much from what you shared with us today. And thank you.
Yes, no, I agree. The supportive factors are, sleep, getting good sleep, eating, your diet, what you eat, all of it, all of it matters. And it does help. It doesn't cure the illness, I have to be very clear, but it does help in reducing the symptoms and the manifestation of the symptoms.
Anne, you had a question?
Yeah, but I think that was the question, exactly what was just talked about. So, about all of our mental health and how all that is happening to all of us,
Yeah.
right? So, wow. Just
I will say,
wow. Yeah.
we began Pathways to Hope 11 years ago with the idea that coming together as a community, supporting one another, learning more about mental health issues, learning about how to, in community, support each other. That's why we started, and we're going to continue this year. Cello is going to be part of our program at the conference. I had a chance Cello asked me to read an advanced copy of the book. And I think what surprised me was that 85% of the book is her and her family's story. I expected it to be more scientific. There's science in there, some of which Cello shared with us today, but it just goes back to the importance of human connection. And I think also, Cello, you mentioned, for example, it's hard for you sometimes to give the same care to your sister that Dan can. Dan, it's hard when it's your family member, and it's
It's
so
very hard, very hard. But the sibling relationship is extremely difficult. It's more, I think, it's different. Father, son, mother, brother, but the type of relationship as a sibling, she makes me, I can't. I'm like, I'm mad. I'm like, "Ugh, why can't you just be this other way?" And I know better. I know. It is absolutely not her fault, but then I still can't help it. So having Dan here, and she loves Dan. He's like her older brother. I I can't tell you how amazingly incredible. I couldn't do it without him. Yeah. So I do talk about that in the book. Yes.
there's a question also, if Cello, if you could put your contact information in the chat
Oh, yes.
while we're finishing up here. Does anybody else have any questions, or we have time for one last question or comment? Um, Seeing none, I want to thank Cello for doing this. As you can tell, it's not just the science, it's the emotional aspect of this and I appreciate her being so vulnerable doing this and writing. I can't even imagine writing a book like this. So thank you, Cello, for, sharing your story and for the work that you do. And for those who want to delve more into the work that Cello's doing in Houston at the UT Health, it's amazing. It involves many brains, MINI. It is groundbreaking, and it's one of the things that gives, I think, everybody some hope that we're continuing to make progress. And I want to thank Cello for the work that she does too. Cello,
Thank
do you have
you.
anything else to say?
I want to say I put my email on the chat. Please reach out to me. I am happy to have a Zoom conversation with anybody one-on-one, and I will be there August 28th. I hope to see you all there, and I will bring copies of the book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody,
Thank you.
for tuning in.
And we will see you all next week. More to come
At the
For all
intersection.
you're doing.
at the intersection. Thank you.